Evan Cross never liked working on alien tech. It always looked like it was made by someone who had never used tools in their life. Too many glowing parts, too many wires that seemed alive, and way too many warning signs in languages he couldn't read. But work was work. And the pay for fixing the alien research device was triple his normal rate. The scientist told him it was simple. Just tighten a few couplings. Replace a coolant line, and don't touch the blue core. That was the part they repeated 3 times. Do not touch the blue core, human, the lead scientist had said. His 4 eyes fixed on Evan, like laser sights. Even a small mistake could be irreversible. Evan had nodded, already sweating under his helmet. The lab smelled like hot metal and strange chemicals. The device sat in the center of the room, taller than him, with rings of light slowly spinning around a glowing blue sphere. The sphere pulsed like a heartbeat. Lyra was there too. She was a young alien researcher, different from the rest of her crew, while the others stayed back. She watched Evan work with quiet interest. Her silver eyes followed every movement of his wrench. "You're braver than I thought," she said softly, her voice almost lost under the hum of the machine. "Not bravery," Evan replied, tightening a bolt. "Just bad life choices." Everything was going fine until the station lights flickered. A low rumble passed through the floor, making his tools rattle. "Ignore that," one of the scientists said from behind the safety glass. Just a minor power adjustment, but the hum of the machine grew louder, sharper. The rings began spinning faster. Evan's wrench slipped from the bolt, clanging against the side of the machine in that one unlucky moment. The wrench's edge scraped the glowing blue core. The sound that followed wasn't like metal breaking. It was like the air itself tearing apart. A blinding light swallowed the room. Evan felt his body lift from the floor, weightless. Then he was slammed back down hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. When he opened his eyes, everything was wrong. The light was gone, replaced by a frozen stillness. The other scientists were still behind the glass, but they weren't moving. One had his mouth open mid-shout. Another had a clipboard falling from his hand suspended in the air. Evan's chest tightened. He turned to Lyra and froze when he saw she was staring at him with the same shock. She was moving, so was he, but no one else was. What just happened?" he asked, his voice sounding too loud in the silent lab. "I don't know," Lyra said, stepping closer. Her hands trembled as she looked at the frozen figures behind the glass. "This isn't possible. Unless," she glanced at the blue core. It was still glowing, but now its light was faint and flickering. Evan's gaze was drawn to the wall clock. It still ticked down from a bright red timer. 0 hours, 9 minutes, and 53 seconds. 9 minutes left until something. But if time was frozen, why was the clock still counting? "This is bad," Lyra whispered. Evan let out a bitter laugh. "Bad? No kidding. I thought fixing this thing was the dangerous part. Turns out turning it on was worse." He walked toward the exit door, hoping to find the control room, but when he pressed the panel, it didn't react. It was dead. Locked in whatever strange state the rest of the station was in, Lyra followed, glancing nervously at the flickering light around. "The core, we shouldn't be able to move. Everyone else is stuck in a kind of stasis field. The device was never meant to be used like this. It was supposed to open a stable wormhole." Evan turned to her. "So what went wrong?" Her silver eyes met his. "You touched the core," she said simply. "And now, we might not be alone in here." Evan frowned. "Not alone? What's that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, something in the corner of the room caught his eye. The air seemed to ripple like heat waves above a desert road at first. He thought it was just his vision, but then the ripple moved, sliding along the wall toward the frozen scientists. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "They can move in the stasis field too, and if they notice us." The ripple stopped. Slowly, it turned toward Evan. It didn't have a face, but somehow he knew it was looking right. At him, the countdown clock ticked to 0 hours 9 minutes and 12 seconds, and Evan's gut told him those 9 minutes might be all they had left. Evan didn't dare move. The strange ripple in the air seemed to breathe. Expanding and shrinking like something alive, Lyra grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. Though the room was already silent, they both held their breath as the ripple drifted closer to the frozen scientists. It passed right through one of them, distorting the man's body like water-bending light. When it came out the other side, the clipboard in midair spun slowly, as if nudged. Evan felt his skin crawl. These things weren't just walking through the frozen scene, they were touching it. Changing it, the ripple moved again, sliding toward the blue core the moment it touched the glowing sphere. The light inside flared slightly. Lyra's eyes widened, they're feeding from it. She said under her breath, "If they drain it completely, the stasis field will collapse. But not in the way we want." Evan's mind spun. He didn't understand all the science talk. But he knew one thing. If the station came back to life the wrong way, whatever these things were might stay behind. And judging by the way they moved, that was a very bad idea. Another ripple appeared near the far wall. Then another. 3. In total now, their shapes were becoming clearer, as if the longer they stayed, the more solid they became. He could almost make out long limbs, hunched backs, and something like a head full of needle-thin spines. The countdown on the wall ticked to 0 hours 8 minutes and 34 seconds. Lyra was already moving toward the side corridor, pulling him along. "We have to get to the reactor access," Stree said, her voice tight with urgency. "That's where the main stabilizer is. If we can restart it manually, we might push them back into their own dimension." Evan glanced over his shoulder. One of the creatures had stopped moving and was staring straight at them again. It began to glide forward, each step making the air ripple harder. The other two turned as well. Following it, they ran. Their footsteps echoed through the metal corridor. And though Evan wanted to believe the creatures couldn't pass through walls, the sharp bends in the corridor didn't make him feel safer. Every few steps, he thought he heard a faint scraping sound behind them. Like claws on glass, the hallway lights flickered, for a moment. He thought they were back in normal time, but then he saw a technician frozen mid-step. Coffee suspended in the air between the man's hand and his lips. Evan and Lyra darted past him, the smell of the coffee strangely sharp in the cold, still air. They reached a sealed bulkhead door. Lyra pressed her hand to the scanner. Nothing happened. She cursed in her language, sharp syllables that sounded like breaking glass. Then turned to him. "The auto systems are locked in stasis too. We'll have to cut through." Before Evan could ask with what, she pulled a small torch-like tool from her belt. Blue flame hissed out as she pressed it to the metal. The sound was deafening in the silence. And it wasn't long before Evan felt the air behind him shift. He didn't turn around. He didn't want to see them this close. The door gave way with a groan, and they slipped through, sealing it as best they could. The space beyond was darker, lit only by strips of pale light along the floor. Machines hummed quietly, as if half asleep. This was deeper in the station, far from the research labs. Here, the air felt heavier, as though the whole place knew something was wrong. Lyra slowed, finally letting go of his arm. "Once we reach the reactor core, we'll need to be fast," she said. "The creatures will follow. They can sense movement in this half-reality. If we stop, we give them time to catch us." Evan rubbed his hands over his face. "I still don't know what those things are," he muttered, "and I'm not sure I want to." "You'll know if they catch us," she said grimly. Her words hung in the air like a shadow somewhere behind them. The sound of metal bending echoed through the corridor. The creatures weren't just following, they were breaking the path. Open one sealed door at a time. The clock in Evan's mind was ticking faster than the one on the wall. They had 8 minutes, maybe less. And in a place where time didn't work right, he wasn't sure if that was good or bad. The sound of bending metal grew louder. Evan felt it through the floor. A deep vibration that made his stomach twist. Lyra quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder more often now. "They're close," she whispered, though whispering didn't matter anymore. The creatures could feel them moving. They passed through a storage bay where crates floated in midair. Held by the same frozen stasis, one crate had split open, and strange crystal shards hovered between them and the ground. Evan's hand brushed against one as they passed. It was cold, but also seemed to hum softly under his fingertips. Lyra yanked his hand away. "Don't touch anything here," she said sharply. "Some of it could explode. Some of it could wake things up." He didn't ask what she meant. His focus was on the far end of the bay, where the faint pale light gave way to a deep, unnatural darkness. The kind of darkness that didn't belong in a place with working lights. It seemed to swallow the glow from the floor strips. Lyra slowed, breathing shallow. "They're here already," she murmured. Shapes began to emerge from that darkness, not ripples now, but clearer forms. Long arms that ended in blade-like fingers. Hunched bodies covered in shifting patterns of black and silver. No eyes that he could see, but every movement felt directed at them. The creatures moved in a way that made no sense, bending as if joints didn't matter, sliding across the floor. Like shadows in water, one stopped only a few meters away, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. Evan could feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears. "What do they want?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Lyra didn't answer right away when she finally spoke. It was almost too quiet to hear. "They want to take you." Before he could react, the creature's chest opened. Not with a tear, but with a smooth, deliberate unfolding. Inside was light, shifting like liquid, and within it, something moved. Small, fast shapes that made his skin prickle. It took a single step forward, and the air between them rippled violently. Evan stumbled back, but Lyra stepped in front of him, holding up a thin metallic rod that crackled with white sparks. The creature stopped, tilting its head again. The other two spread out to the sides, closing in slowly. "They're testing us," Lyra said through clenched teeth. "If we run now, they'll follow us to the core. But if we stand too long, they'll surround us." Evan's mind raced. He didn't have weapons. He didn't even have a plan. All he had was the stubborn feeling that he wasn't going to let some shadow things decide what happened to him. He grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the floor. "All right," he muttered, mostly to himself. "If they want me, they're gonna have to work for it." The lead creature moved first, lunging in a way that was almost too fast to see. Lyra swung the sparking rod, the tip passing through its body like smoke. But it let out a sound that made the air vibrate, a deep, low note that made Evan's bones ache. The other two lunged as well, forcing them back toward the corridor. Something in Evan's gut told him this was exactly what the creatures wanted. They weren't just chasing them, they were herding them toward the core. And whatever reason they had for wanting that, it wasn't going to be good for anyone. The countdown in his head wouldn't stop ticking. 0 hours, 7 minutes, and 11 seconds. 7 minutes left, but with the way the creatures moved, it felt like time was already gone. Evan and Lyra burst into the next corridor, their footsteps echoing like gunshots in the still air. The walls here were warmer. Faint vibrations running through them, a sign they were close to the reactor chamber. Ahead, a massive door waited, its surface marked with glowing alien symbols that pulsed faintly. Lyra ran to the side control panel, but like before, it was dead. "No power in the system," she said, her voice quick with frustration. "We'll have to force it open manually." Evan didn't know how to force open a door taller than 2 people and made of solid alloy. But Lyra was already pulling another tool from her belt, a flat, heavy device with two grips. She pressed it to the door's seam and twisted. A deep hum filled the corridor, followed by a sharp crack as the metal shifted, slowly, painfully. The door began to open just enough for them to squeeze through. They slipped inside, sealing it behind them as best they could, though Evan knew it wouldn't hold for long. The reactor chamber was unlike any part of the station he'd seen, a vast circular space. The walls lined with machinery that pulsed. With faint light at the center stood the reactor core, a towering column of metal and light wrapped in rotating rings. Its glow was weak and uneven, like a candle fighting wind. "We need to get to the stabilizer controls," Lyra said, pointing toward a platform halfway up the core. "It's manual access we have to climb." Evan groaned but moved toward the ladder bolted to the wall. Every step echoed into the chamber, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the sound was carrying farther than it should. Halfway up, a flicker of movement caught his eye below. Between the reactor's shadows, something shifted, slow, deliberate, three shapes darker than the dark, sliding into the chamber through vents and gaps in the machinery. "They're here," he called down. Lyra didn't look back. "Then we move faster," she said, her voice hard. They reached the platform and crossed to a small control station. Circular panel with physical levers and dials. Lyra pointed to one lever at the far end. "That's the manual reset. Once I pull it, the reactor will spike energy for a few seconds. If we time it right, the burst will push the creatures back into their own dimension. And if we time it wrong?" Evan asked. She met his eyes. "Then we burn everything. Us, them, and maybe the station too." Evan stared at her for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Guess we better get it right then." Below, the creatures were no longer hiding. They moved along the floor like living shadows, their bodies stretching and bending as they climbed the walls toward the platform. One of them let out a sound, not a roar, but a deep, wet scraping that made the air shake. The reactor's weak light flickered harder, as if responding to the noise. Lyra's hands moved quickly over the controls, setting the stabilizer for the reset. Evan grabbed a heavy wrench from the floor and stood by the ladder, ready to swing at anything that came up. The countdown on the wall behind the core ticked down: 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 29 seconds. They were running out of time in every way possible. The first creature reached the edge of the platform, its long fingers curling over the metal. Evan swung hard, the wrench passing through like smoke but still making the thing recoil. It hissed, a sound that rattled in his bones, and then lunged again. "Evan," Lyra shouted, "get ready. When I say now, pull the auxiliary release." The second creature climbed up from the opposite side, cutting off their escape. The third circled below, waiting. Evan's knuckles were white around the wrench. The air in the chamber seemed heavier. Now, each breath harder to take. Whatever happened next was going to decide if they made it out or if they'd vanish into the dark forever. The reactor chamber shook with a deep, rising hum. Lyra's hands flew over the controls, her silver eyes locked on the unstable readings. Evan stood guard at the ladder, gripping the wrench so hard his palms ached. The first creature lunged again, its long fingers curling over the railing. Evan swung, the wrench passing through like smoke, but the thing still shuddered, as if the hit mattered. It hissed, the sound making his teeth hurt, and pulled itself higher. The second creature moved faster. Climbing over the side near Lyra, she spun, pulling a small cylinder from her belt and smashing it into the floor. A burst of white light exploded outward, making the creature recoil. It melted backward into shadow, sliding away from the brightness. "That bought us seconds," she said, her voice sharp. "Seconds are all I need." Evan risked a glance at the reactor core. The rotating rings were speeding up, their uneven flicker becoming a steady pulse. A low vibration rattled through the platform under his boots. Somewhere deep inside the machine, something was winding up like a storm about to break. The third creature, the one that had stayed below, began to change. Its shape stretched taller, its limbs lengthening, the spines along its back growing like knives. It moved toward the ladder with terrifying speed. Evan swung again, but this time the wrench barely made the thing slow down. It was learning. Evan, now. Lyra shouted. He turned, saw her pointing at a thick lever on the auxiliary panel. Without thinking, he grabbed it and pulled hard. The sound that followed wasn't like machinery. It was like the air itself screamed. The reactor's light burst white, flooding the entire chamber. The creatures reacted instantly, twisting and curling away as if the light was burning them. One tried to leap toward Evan, but in midair, its body tore apart into strands of shadow that evaporated before hitting the floor. The other two fought to hold their shapes, their forms breaking apart like smoke and wind. For a moment, Evan thought they were winning. Then the lights in the chamber flickered. The core's steady hum turned into a harsh, broken whine. Lyra's face went pale. "Too much strain, the stabilizer can't hold it," she said. "If it collapses now, it'll drag everything into the rift, including us." Evan's heart pounded. "So, what do we do?" Her eyes locked on the main lever beside the core. "We cut the burst early, but someone has to do it manually, right at the core's base." He followed her gaze down to the floor far below. The metal grating was bathed in blinding light, shadows, writhing and twisting at the edges. It wasn't a place anyone sane would run toward. But without it, the reactor would burn itself apart, and them with it. "I'll do it," Evan said before he could stop himself. Lyra looked like she wanted to argue, but the timer on the wall read 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 42 seconds. There wasn't time. She just gave a quick nod. "Go, and don't stop for anything." Evan took a deep breath, gripped the ladder, and started down. The light seared his eyes, the heat rising from the core hitting him like a furnace every step. Made his muscles burn, but he kept going. Behind him, above, he could hear the creatures shrieking as they were forced back toward whatever place they came from. But he could also hear something else, the sound of one of them refusing to go. It was waiting for him below. Evan reached the last section of the ladder. The heat now so strong it felt like it was trying to push him back. Sweat poured down his face. His arms ached. But the sight below made him forget the pain. The creature waiting at the base of the core was not like the others. It was bigger. Its body stretched and twisted as if it had stolen pieces of all the others before it. Its limbs scraped the floor, long spines dragging behind like hooked chains. The light from the core burned against its shadowy skin. But it held its ground. It tilted its head when it saw him, a slow, deliberate motion. A voice like 100 whispers filled his mind. "Come closer." Human, Evan froze for a heartbeat, his chest tightening. He had no weapon now, just his hands and the will to keep moving. He jumped the last few steps, landing hard, the floor vibrating under him. The main lever was only a few meters away, but the creature slid to block it, its body stretching unnaturally to fill the space. The whispers came again, sharper this time. "You opened the way. You belong to us now." Evan forced his legs to move. "Yeah, not today," he muttered. He darted left, feinting toward the side, and the creature lunged. Its clawed hand passed through the space he'd been a second before, the air freezing around. He could feel the cold sink into his skin, even though it didn't touch him directly. The light from the core pulsed harder, each burst making the creature's form shimmer and tear at the edges. It roared, not a sound, but a feeling that rattled inside his head. Evan ducked under its arm and sprinted for the lever. The heat here was blinding, every breath like fire. But his hands found the metal handle above him. Lyra shouted something he couldn't hear over the roar of the reactor. The creature twisted behind him, lunging with all its weight. Evan pulled the lever with everything he had the instant it moved. A wave of blinding white light exploded outward. It hit the creature like a wall, tearing it apart into countless strands of shadow that were ripped backward into nothing. The floor shook so violently he almost lost his footing. The core's rings slowed, the blinding glow dimming into a steady, softer light, somewhere high. Above, he could see Lyra still at the controls, her face lit by the fading burst. But the danger wasn't gone yet. The countdown on the wall now read 0 hours, 1 minute, and 7 seconds. And whatever was going to happen when it reached 0 was still coming. Evan's chest rose and fell as he stared at the space where the creature had been. The heat was fading, but in the air around him, a faint whisper still lingered. It wasn't gone completely. It was waiting. Evan climbed back up the ladder, his legs heavy, each step slower than the last. The reactor's light was steady now, the violent shaking gone. But the hum in the air still carried something unnatural. Lyra reached for him as he pulled himself onto the platform, her hands gripping his arms tight. "You did it," she said. But her voice didn't sound relieved. Her silver eyes flicked toward the countdown. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 52 seconds. They both stared at it. Neither spoke. They didn't know if it was still connected to the rift or if it was some other system ready to activate. But whatever it was, they had less than a minute. "We have to get out of here," Evan said. Lyra nodded, already running for the exit. They pushed through the chamber door, sprinted down the corridor. The sound of their footsteps echoing in the half-dead silence. Every frozen figure they passed seemed ready to move at any second. It was like running through a graveyard, where the dead might wake. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 21 seconds. They reached the outer lab. The blue core still faintly glowing in its housing. The frozen scientist stood exactly as before, one with his mouth open, mid-shout. One with the clipboard still hanging in the air. Evan slowed, looking at them. If this worked, they'd all come back like nothing happened. If it didn't? He didn't want to think about that. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 5 seconds. The air thickened, pressing against his skin. Lyra grabbed his wrist, pulling him toward the far door, the moment the timer hit 0. The entire world seemed to blink. The frozen scientists gasped. As if waking from a dream, the clipboard clattered to the floor. Alarms blared across the station. Everyone was moving again, talking, shouting. But none of them seemed to know anything had happened. Evan and Lyra just stood there, breathing hard. No one asked why they were in the lab. No one noticed the scorch marks on Evan's sleeves or the faint burns on Lyra's hands. It was as if the last 10 minutes had been erased from everyone but them. Later, when the noise had calmed and the scientists were resetting their equipment, Lyra leaned closer. "Don't tell them," she said quietly. "They wouldn't believe it, and it's not over." Evan frowned. "What do you mean, not over?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away. Leaving him alone beside the blue core, he stared at it, the glow steady now, harmless looking. But then, faintly, just at the edge of his hearing, the whisper came again, a voice like 100 shadows breathing in unison. "We'll see you soon." Human, Evan didn't move. He just stood there, staring into the light. And for the first time since the accident, he wondered if pulling that lever had really saved them, or only bought them time.